Welcome to Inspired Living with Mark and Kim. Every Wednesday, Mark and Kim, along with their special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Mark and Kim will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience, and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Mark and Kim are tested, certified, and professional spiritual mediums, metaphysical teachers, healers, and spiritual advisors with their own individual spiritual practices in Seattle, Washington, and Los Angeles, California. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Albert Einstein once said, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are at in the world. Today is Wednesday, May 11th, and this is Inspired Living with Mark and Kim here on OMTimes Radio, the voice of consciousness. I am your host, Mark Lanehart, back with a very nice tan after being in San Jose, Los Cabos, Mexico, and a great vacation with many soul adventures and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. If you're looking for your own spiritual awesomeness, guidance, healing, mentoring, workshops, or spiritual hikes, look me up at the Intuitive Prospector or marklanehart.com, and let's get out there and do a little prospecting. I do have a workshop coming up on June 12th in Spokane, Washington, called Spiritual Borders. So if you're in the Spokane area, I'd love to work with you. It's about a 4-hour workshop. And then on July 16th down in California, going to be doing the same workshop, Spiritual Borders, with my lovely co-host, Kim Thalken, founder of Love First. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Mark. Welcome back. We're so happy to have you.
You've been riding solo the last 2 shows, but they were great shows. I had a chance to listen to them live last week when you were talking with Jeff. I was actually way out, just got done scuba diving and was sitting at a little bar drinking a Pacifico and listening to the show. So it was really awesome to hear you guys do a shout out for the May the 4th be with you. So thank you for that. That made my day.
Well, it was a fun show, and it was fun knowing that you were also listening in. So we're glad to have you back, Mark. You're always missed when you're gone.
Good to be back. So
as Mark said, I'm Kim Thalken, founder of Love First, where life transformations happen in Encino, California. So if you're looking for a little support on your path in the way of perhaps greater understanding of life events, maybe some healings, hypnotherapy, you're just looking to further your spiritual development, I would love to hear from you. And I can be found at lovefirst.info. As Mark said, we are doing a workshop together on July 16th here in LA, which I'm so excited about. Anytime I get to work with my partner in person, it's a good day. So make sure you keep posted on further developments on that workshop. I do have another one coming up this weekend, the Angel Communication Workshop on the 14th and 15th. We do have 2 seats left. If you'd like to reserve yours today, you can do that at lovefirst.info as well. Mark?
And for our listeners, how can they find us out on the social media network? And what's our inspired affirmation for the month of May?
Yes. Well, we are all over social media, and we just love to interact with our inspired community. So if you'd like to follow us or interact with us or send your questions through, you can do so on Facebook under Inspired Living Radio, Twitter and Instagram under Inspired for Us, Google Plus under Inspired Living with Mark and Kim. And reach out and say hi. We like getting to know who all of our listeners are, and we love having you a part of this community. For our inspired affirmation for the month of May, it is, every day in every way, my life gets better and better. And who doesn't want that? I love it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I love that positive affirmation, and so easy to remember. And if they miss the live show, Kim, how can they follow us on our other outlets that we have? Because we're on iTunes now and YouTube.
We sure are. Yes. If you listen or if you miss our live show and you want to, or you've heard it and you just want to hear it again because it's so good, you can find us on OMTimes Radio Archives. You can also find us on Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. And of course, Mark always does a great job of keeping his site current with all of the shows as well under marklanehart.com.
Yeah, I was just organizing the shows, and if you can believe it, we're approaching 50 shows here already on Inspired Living Radio, which is amazing. I don't know where the time's gone, but we're getting close. We're going to have a big celebration for our 50th episode.
I love it, Mark. I know the time has gone by pretty fast, and just as every hour does. With our guests, like we can never seem to get through everything that we want to talk about because there's so much to talk about, but we're always just honored that our guests choose to share this hour with us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and speaking of today's guest, we have Dianne Collins. We're going to be talking about her book, Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World. So it's going to be a very interesting topic, and I really want to start getting into the details of that, kind of just jump in. I was talking to Dianne before the show, and we were talking about how best way to present quantum think, and this is her first time to Inspired Living Radio, and I was looking through the book, and it's just a fascinating book. So if you are into metaphysics, if you're into quantum physics, if you're into quantum thinking, this is the show for you, because Dianne is going to break it down exactly what is quantum think, something that she trademarked back in 1997, and what can we do with it? How can we apply it to our lives? And what is quantum think? So I want to get right into the show, Kim, because there's a lot of information here, and let's get Dianne onto the show right now. So Dianne, we want to just welcome you to Inspired Living Radio. Thanks for agreeing to be a guest today on Wisdom Wednesday.
Well, it is so my pleasure, Mark and Kim. I love your show. I love what you're doing, and let's get right to it.
Yeah, I was going to read your bio, but I want you to tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself and kind of introduce yourself to the world we're listened to in many different countries, and just let people know about who you are, how you came up with this concept, where to find your book, and let's do this. Let's get it all crammed in there before our first break here.
Okay, good. It's always an interesting question, right? Who are you? We could answer that in so many different dimensions, right? Soul, spirit, body, and emotion.
Many different forms.
Many different forms. But basically, I would say that who I am is very much like everyone else. And when people always ask you, what is your story? That even though we each have our own individual, unique, everything about us, universally we're the same. So in a sense, my story is our story. And what is our story? As I was growing up, you look in the world and you see that there is some kind of a discrepancy between how we want to be, the virtues that we want to live up to, how we want to be with our loved ones in our life, and what we can accomplish in living our purpose, and all of it in being connected, really connected to spirit and the divine, the sacred. And then you see, as I did, the gap. Well, as a society, human society, that is, we're not quite there. As an individual, I want to be able to live as a masterful being. I think that's what all the great wisdom teachers have taught. That is what they have told us, from Jesus to Buddha to Krishna, or, name your source or your representation of source. And I think that's what we're here to be. So who I am is someone who wanted to find out, like a good little Virgo who wants to analyze and figure things out, how to make things better. How do we do that? And along the way, you come across, as you think, so you become. And so I looked at that. And again, it's said in the Upanishads and the ancient teachings of India. It's said in the Bible, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The Buddha said all that we are is a result of what we've thought. And so for me, I thought, well, if all you had to do was change your thought to change your life, to change the world, then why, how does that happen? So that was really my quest, and who I am has been to discover a method, an access point, an easy way for us to become these, the living spirit of who we're here to be in practical, daily, everyday, ordinary life. So on a practical level, for over 20 years, I've husband, master quantum think coach and consultant, Dianne K. Collins. We have a beautiful marriage of over 26 years. And we have been delivering the Quantum Think system. Quantum Think is actually a system of thinking, I call it, of principles and practices, 21 plus 1. Somehow numerologically, I call it that, for the mind and awareness that have us having a shift in consciousness from the framework from which we think and live our lives, our state of being, that are more in sync with what we know at the edge of reality today, according to quantum principles and spiritual wisdom. And so I think that kind of wraps it up, right?
Oh, my goodness, Dianne. That was a lot of really meaty information in one swoop there.
She did it in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm proud of her.
But so many different.
Oh my God, was I talking that long? Okay.
Yeah.
No, we just got the first break coming up.
Stuff. There was just a lot of really important information in that. Not like just one topic here, one topic there. Was a lot of really great stuff that I feel like we need to get into, better understand.
Well, great key points, right? I think, therefore, I am. So we're going to go into our first break here. Like I said, it goes by really quick. But when we come back with Dianne Collins, we're going to be talking about Quantum Think, new thinking that will rock your world. You're listening to Inspired Living Radio with Mark and Kim. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, Mediumship Messages and Musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences, to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your host on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Are you seeking answers to life questions? Would you like to connect to a departed loved one? Are you suffering from pain, stress, or anxiety? Kimberly Thalkin is a tested, certified, and professional psychic, spiritual medium, energy healer, hypnotherapist, and the founder of Love First, where life transformations happen. Love First services support, guide, and empower individuals by connecting them to their highest potential to live a healthier, joyful, and meaningful life that's filled with purpose. All services can be done by phone, Skype, or in person in Encino, California. Please visit lovefirst.info. That's lovefirst.info for more information. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
And welcome back, inspired listeners, to Inspired Living with Mark and Kim, and our special guest today, Dianne Collins, author of the book, Do You Quantum Think? So Dianne, you gave just a fabulous introduction of your background and the principles that you so believe in before we went to break. There was so much, I think, in there that I would love to talk about and better understand, and I know our community would too. We're talking about the word quantum a lot here. Let's start with that. What does quantum mean? We hear it in quantum physics, quantum views, now quantum think. Can you explain to us what the word quantum means?
Well, I can certainly give you my rendition. And it's such an interesting question because that's the new buzzword, right? As you said, Kim, quantum this, quantum healing. And really what the word means, it means an amount. So it was originally used to measure the smallest amount of measurable energy, which, technically the father of quantum mechanics, Max Planck, and he said, energy doesn't move in a smooth, continuous flow. It moves in leaps and packets of energy that he called quanta, hence the term quantum leap. And this is how the scientists invent new language according to what they see in the world, right? And how does everything work around here on the planet, and I guess in the universe too. And so this word quantum you have to really look at it from the point of view of how do we use it today, right, in everyday world. And it really represents a shift in the way that we view how we're related in the world. And that shift was really said very simply from a matter-based or a physical-based reality framework to a mind-based reality framework. So OMTimes, your show, what we're all about here, the people listening and being in this conversation with us right now, we know that consciousness is fundamentally the substance of reality. Yet we've all been brought up more or less in a culture, I call it Tale of Two Realities, that where the science of the 17th century, they said, oh, no, it's physically based reality. So then when you look at what is quantum, it's really a whole new framework that when you start to look at physical, for example, well, the physical is part of quantum because quantum is holistic. It's whole view. But just as a major difference, when you look in the physical world only, which our society is oriented around, that's why we call things like mediumship, like energy healing, and all the things that, we're all about. Why do they call it alternative, la, and all that? Because we didn't have a framework for thinking big enough, a way of looking at reality where these things were actually real to us. So the quantum worldview is bringing that now, thank goodness, into our world. So I was going to give you one quick example, is that when you look in a physical dimension only. Now, all of us know we live in multidimensionality, physical, energetic, virtual of the mind, spirit of the heart, soul, and the divine, and cosmic laws, that we're living in all those things all the time. But when you're oriented, when the focus is around the physical, in the physical dimension, we look separate from each other. We look the outside world, we call it the external world. It looks like a bunch of circumstances out there that we have to try to manipulate our way around. Whereas when you're quantum thinking, when you have that quantum perspective, you realize, there are distinctions, but no actual separation. Therefore, why is that important? It means that what I think, how I feel, what I resonate is connecting, that I have an influence on on everything, really, right? That what we resonate, we know, we emanate out, and there's connectivity. It's like the internet. Everything is always connected and online. And so that quantum, it's a completely different way of relating to the world. And that's how I look at when you ask, what is quantum? It's to look holistically. It's to live in multidimensionality. It's to know that we exist in these invisible fields of energy, information, love, awareness, consciousness, all of the above, where when we start to live deliberately, consciously, we can use those principles to the greatest advantage.
So you've talked a lot about new ways of thinking, shifting of consciousness. What does that look like? What does new ways of thinking look like?
Well, for example, based on what I was just talking about, one of the key distinctions of a quantum worldview, of quantum physics, and quantum thinking is not about science. It's about how we can use the discoveries of science to expand the way we think, to become more masterful beings. So one of the core distinctions is the observer effect. And in quantum thinking, the 21 plus 1 distinctions, this is the core distinction. I call it observer-created reality, that we're living in an observer-created reality. That means what we hold in observation, it's not just perception, because remember, quantum is multidimensional and perception is of the physical. That's ordinary 5 senses. But what we hold in consciousness, what we hold in awareness, is shaping what we see. That's the observer effect, is that we, as human observers, are affecting what we see. In the spiritual literature, they say it like this: the world exists on the screen of your own consciousness. Now, in quantum think, I like to make everything very simple, right? What you bring is what you get. So if you're looking at your husband, for example, I don't know why my husband came into mind. Let's make it real. What views do I have about my husband? What conclusions have I made? What judgments do I have about him based on my past experiences with him? Well, whatever I think, whatever those conclusions are, if they're not serving our relationship, if they're not serving him, if they're not serving me or the people in our lives, then from a quantum think perspective, quantum thinking is knowing that just because I have a thought doesn't make it the truth. Underlying an energy and flux reality is there's no static reality. There's no absolute way that something is. There's no absolute way my husband is. In every moment, I have an opportunity to shift my experience of my husband, and therefore, because we exist in fields, shift the whole experience, what I call the relational field, between us, because we're always emanating out. So if I have a conclusion, Kim and Mark and everyone, that is not supportive, that is disempowering, if I think, oh, my husband never listens, he's a terrible listener. That sounds right in a marriage, right? Then I can catch myself, interrupt that automatic, I call it in quantum think, least action pathways, the least creative, the least conscious action, the way the energy or the thought goes, simply because it's been that route before, like a rut, an automatic thought. I can interrupt and say, well, wait a minute. I don't want to think about my husband that way. Observer effect. Hey, I'm the observer. What I bring to my observation is what I get. I'm going to get reflected back exactly what I'm bringing. So quantum thinking is catching yourself in the act of an automatic disempowering thought, either about yourself or anything else, a world situation, anybody in your life, and realizing it's not the truth. I don't have to own it. I don't have to identify with it in any way. I can now what? Create a different reality in that moment of our experience together by virtue of intent.
Now, Dianne, just quickly for the audience here, so you're shifting your thoughts about this new experience. So you're shifting your thoughts so that you can bring in a new experience with your husband. How does that, does he somehow, how does that affect your husband, or how does that inspire him to shift because your thinking has shifted? How does that process work?
When you think about it, right? Well, of course, especially that you've got a heightened sense of it, but we feel one another. So, you can walk, or you can be with someone you love or someone who you just met, and you can you feel, in a sense, how they're feeling, don't you? You can feel it.
Sure. You can feel that.
We feel each other without anything being said. And you see, from the old way of thinking, what I lovingly call the old world view, that physically oriented view where, it looks like separate. It looks like, how do I get him to be nicer or more loving? But you asked the good question, Kim, like, what is he experiencing? Because how I'm holding him, like when you are in a state of love for someone, right? And you're just loving them, you're just listening like wholeheartedly, 100%. They can feel that without you saying a word. And when that happens, there's another distinction in quantum thinking called being in one conversation.
And Dianne, hold that thought for one moment here. We're heading into break. This is a good topic of conversation, folks. Talking about relationships and quantum think. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Inspired Think.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millises, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Simone Millises would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com. One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Mark Lanehart, the intuitive prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Mark's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Mark's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marklanehart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Dr. Kevin here, and I want to invite you every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, to join me on The Dr. Kevin Show, where we have a diversity of guests who help you step outside the box, behind the curtain, and see what a load of crap is going on in the world today. so you have more information with which to make better decisions. We'll see you there. Namaste.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And welcome back to Inspired Living with Mark and Kim here on OMTimes Radio. Our special guest, Dianne Collins, talking about quantum think, new thinking that will rock your world. Before we went into break, Dianne, you were right in the middle of talking about relationships and how relationships and quantum think actually go hand in hand. So I just wanted to pick up where we left off before break and just continue on with that. And then I also want to talk right from the book, reading through the book, and give a little example of how the book reads for our community that's listening to the show today, and where they can find your book if they want to check you out.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, where were we?
Relationships.
We were talking about relationships, and Kim, you were asking me about when we make that shift in ourselves, where we catch ourselves in a judgment. But let me just say this. We all know what to do, right? It's not like I'm saying something that we don't, every one of us already know in our own being. And this is the intent of all of my work and my book, Do You Quantum Think, is that you connect to your own awareness as you read. I call this the art of distinguishing, a new worldview of learning. The old worldview of learning still very significant and important in many areas of life, where you acquire information and try to apply it. The art of distinguishing is all about awareness, learning through giving yourself an experience of awareness. And that's how this integrates. And that's how we go from merely knowing the wisdom to actually living it. Because what happens is it gets ignited in you. What we're already connected to infinite intelligence, to all that is. And we are connected through what in the a scientific term, but we can use it in everyday life, called a non-local mind field. The nature of mind, the nature of consciousness, it's called non-local. What does it mean? It means it's not located. First of all, it's not located in our body. Our mind and our conscious, it's not synonymous with the brain. The brain is a transmitter, like the computer that transmits mind, called, the internet. And that we are, wait a minute, I went off on a tangent in my own head. But what the idea of this non-local mind is that.
But you just used your technique to come back to it, right? Did you just actually apply that technique you've been talking about?
That's what we're talking about, Mark. That's exactly it. And this is the idea of this, is that how do you live all the wisdom that is so available, that is ancient and modern at the same time, that we all know how to be, do not judge, be unto others, they would be unto you. All these different things, live your purpose. What are you uniquely here for? How do you connect to it? So we all know what to do. So the idea of this is actually connecting to a framework, which I call a system, because it's a universe of whole systems, so that the system embraces you. It's like you go into the supermarket, there's a system. You have a shopping list. You don't have to look for, every single item on the thousands, hundreds of thousands shelf, because there's a system. So when you see this emerging new worldview that we're all excited about, that we know we're all bringing about this new reality, this new era of consciousness for humanity, that when you see it, when you put it all together, which is what, my divine guidance was to do, then all of a sudden, you're just going with it. So as you said, Mark, it's like you just catch yourself in the moment. Oh, wait a minute. There was that, my mind, we call it drifting. Oh, and that brings us back You must be psychic, Mark. Two, right? Being in one conversation. That's what I was talking about before the break, that one of the quantum thing distinctions, which is like a higher octave of the basic number one principle, holistic and holographic. Holistic is not just alternative healing. It means everything is interconnected and interrelated, including our conversations. So when you're in relationship, if you have the distinction being in one conversation, which in essence is to treat the conversation as one pulsating living presence with many voices. So we're all in this conversation. Kim, Mark, me, and everybody listening beyond the limits of space-time because of our amazing technology. And so the listening is as significant as the speaking, because as a listener, you are creating the awareness of the exchange of energy, information, consciousness at the same time as we are speaking it. And this is what happened. That sounds like, that sounds like big and lofty, but it really is very everyday. Is that when you realize being in one conversation, my husband and I will start, because what really happens in a conversation is like we're saying, okay, hurry up and finish so I can get my part in. Well, you're not saying it, but you're thinking it, right? Or we're being it. So how do we make this transformation to this living the elevated consciousness is in these small ways. And you went back to the word quantum. It means a very, very the smallest measurable unit. And yet a tiny step of awareness has monumental effects in your relationships. If you think in that moment, and we actually say it to each other because, we work at it. We know the system. Oh, wait a minute. You're not being in one conversation. That's all we have to say to each other. And we snap out of it wherever we were drifting off into our own thing. And we come back, and what happens is you give yourself over. I call it listening with your whole being is the practice. You give yourself over to whoever is speaking. And what happens is that because we exist in fields, quantum fields of energy information, divine inspiration, that things will arise. When we say spirit tapped me on the shoulder, spirit spoke to me. Things will arise because the connection that you're making is so clear with one another. And this is dramatic in relationship.
So when you're having these thoughts, Dianne, how did you apply what you have learned to actually catch that thought and stop that thought from going down? Because there's an important part of the book I want to talk about living presently. And a lot of times our minds and our thoughts take us to the what if world or what we didn't do world, or we're so distracted because time is speeding up and we have so many new, from the internet to the latest iPhone application we have a lot going on. So how did you actually stop that mid thought and be like, no, that's not what I wanted to think? Time out, redirect, and focus in on the present time. Because I want to read a section of the book that talks about why should you quantum think? And you say in the book, there's only one reason: to have a great life. That's it. How simple is that?
That's it. What else is there, right?
And we all want that, right?
And, whatever that means for each of us individually, everybody wants that, even if they think they don't. They do. But, it gets back to the system. It's that once you start reading, these distinctions, as I say, it's like an activation force. It activates it in you. These principles that are operating throughout the universe and therefore within you and me, we're all part of nature. And what happens, Mark, is that it's hard to explain it because it's not a how-to, or as I like to say, how-to is a has-been. Again, how-to, it's a both-and world. So how-to
more of an awareness and an attunement to
it's
actually.
Exactly, because it occurs in quantum leaps. It's an instantaneous shift with no pathway. How did you do it? How did you get there? It's that once you have these distinctions in your awareness, then it kicks in like the whole system. It's like, usually, I use this analogy, we're on the earth and we're looking out at the cosmos and we're looking out from what we experience as our physical body. But imagine it's the other way around. Imagine you're out in space like an astronaut and you're looking back at the earth and you're looking back at you standing on the earth. When we do this, that's a quantum leap in consciousness. So it's first of all to have the intent to make that literal quantum leap in consciousness where instead of looking at the principles and trying to apply them from your current perspective, which is usually for most people, back and forth, undifferentiated. Sometimes you're quantum thinking, sometimes your old worldview, automatic thinking, mechanical. But when you make that leap, as soon as it comes up, it's just an instantaneous catching yourself. And then when you know the principles of what we have been divinely bestowed with to create with, that is, intent being the main one, then it's just like an automatic thing. But, you brought up something I think very important to mention about, the complexity and the amount of choices, increasing infinite choice that we have today. I think.
So real quick,
talk about that, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that in the last section of the show. But I agree with you. Energy follows intent, and everything is about intent. So stick around. We got 2 minutes for our last break. We have Dianne Collins talking all about quantum think here on Inspired Living Radio. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Join Vibe Nation radio host, international psychic medium Carrie Turcotte, as she guides her listeners to rediscover themselves by accessing the keys of knowledge that already exist within. Each week's show is divinely orchestrated to intertwine with the universal energies, allowing the listeners to go deeper within. At the end of each show, Carrie will tap into the energies of the listeners and give a message from Spirit about the upcoming week. If you really want to get to know who you truly are, join Carrie each Monday at 3 p.m. on Vibe Nation Radio.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hey ladies, do you want to have that good hair day feeling all the time? Gentlemen, would you want your special someone to have that glow, letting you know she's feeling completely satisfied? This feeling and that glow can be yours by embracing your sexual power. So join me, Rachel Kenley, award-winning romance author, on the O-Spot. The O-Spot will guide you to that peak with guest interviews, book discussions, and conversations on the thrills of sexual empowerment. Put the zing back in your life, come up and see me sometime on the O Spot, live on Hump Day at 10 p.m. Eastern.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And welcome back to Inspired Living with Mark and Kim and our special guest today, Dianne Collins, as we talk about the power of our thoughts and quantum think. So Dianne, before we went to break, we had left off, you were in the middle of an explanation that Mark was talking about choices based on living in the present and also the power of intention.
Yes. Did you want to talk about that? Good.
Sure.
Okay, because in Quantum Think, I make a distinction between intent and intention. So, it may sound like nothing, but really it's all about distinguishing. The more refined we distinguish the way we think and the way we live, this is what has us be in that, those quantum shifts. So the reason that I do this is because if you think of intention, and they're both important, of course, as an end goal, an end result, something measurable. I want to make $1 million in my business next year. I think of that like an intention. Whereas intent is an activating force. It's an activation of the energy intelligent field that we could also call our personal resonance. And so we know what we resonate, we're putting out, people are connecting to, it's having an effect. But we can also know that it doesn't have to be by chance or haphazard, that we can generate what field we want to be resonating in. And that's through intent, the directed, deliberate direction of our intent, attention, and energy. So when we think of intent, it's not an end goal. It's an ever-present energetic force. And it's more than energy because it's energy, consciousness, intelligence. So for an example, a statement of intent could be, and you always say it, as we all know, in the present tense, as if it already is, because this is what you're doing, is you're generating your own resonance. And so I might say around that financial, I always use that as an example because I know it's on people's minds, no matter how much money we have or don't have. You could say, I'm really happy about the way my financial status is unfolding. Or I'm thrilled about how my financial status is growing. And you see, that's not, I forgot to mention one important thing. If from a quantum world view, since there is no fixed and static way that something is, there's nothing fixed in stone. That's the good news, because that means we do not have to create our intent based on circumstances, or as I say, old world view, circumstance rules, new world view, intent rules. So the first thing you have to realize is that if you have a belief that it can never happen, any kind of limiting belief, that your belief is not the absolute truth in stone for all times. That's the first very, very, very important distinction to make. And even if you're feeling it, even if it feels emotional, even if you have 10 years of evidence for it, if you want to make these quantum shifts to generate a different resonance and therefore attract different experiences, then you must know that very fundamental quantum fact. Everything is energy in flux informed by intelligence. There's nothing fixed about your life. So now you may, and of course there are caveats we're not going to go into, but, something and physical. But let's just talk about in the nature of creating your experience, which leads to your actions, which leads to your results. This is where we can connect powerfully. So intent. I'm happy about the way my financial status is unfolding. It's no different than is the glass half empty, half full. The amount of water is the same. The circumstances are the same of what I woke up into yesterday as I woke up into today. But if you know that reality is context dependent, that you're shaping it based on what you're choosing to live from, you can choose something new. You can create an intent, knowing that not because it's the truth that I love my financial status, the way it's unfolding, but because I'm choosing to live from glass half full. I'm choosing to live from, I love the way my financial status is unfolding, because you will attract circumstances consistent with your intent. So is that making sense?
Yes. So are you saying then that when you set your intent that way, I love the way my finances are unfolding, then is that like maybe like an affirmation? Does your resonance start to change because that's the intent that you have?
It is, but and I love that you do the affirmations. It's so inspiring. But when we look at the affirmation, and here's another difference between the ordinary thinking and quantum thinking, is that in the physical world, the dynamic is cause and effect. So people have an expectation, this is why they say, this doesn't work and positive thinking doesn't work and it's all woo-woo. Because if intent is not a cause and effect dynamic, intent is a field effect dynamic. So it's not a direct, obvious linkage, press on that and this moves in that mechanical cause and effect way. So when you look at affirmations, if you understand affirmation as something that you're choosing, not trying to cover up a negative belief with a positive thought. It's a very important distinction when you're using affirmations. Mm-hmm. That you don't, you see what I'm saying, Kim? It's like if you're holding any thought you have, any conclusion that you have as this is the way it is, and then you try to plaster something over it. My husband Alan calls it putting jelly on top of peanut butter, taking a bite and pretending the peanut butter's not there. It's that the first fundamental, breaking it up, and the good news is to realize, well, just because I've had that thought about myself, that I couldn't do that I couldn't, be a great speaker in the world on a stage, or whatever it is thought you have that you have that fear about, or that you have those misgivings about, or doubts. Just because I've had that thought about myself for the last 10 years doesn't make it the truth. I can now create, first of all, interfere with that thought, break it up and let it transmute back into where it came from, right? From the world of potential. Everything is potential in this universe. Discreate that. And create, as you say, if you want to use affirmation, intent is like an affirmation where you're generating a resonance. You're generating an energy that you want to live with, that you want to become. That because life is holographic, when you create that my husband is a great listener, and you don't even have to tell him that or speak it. That's in your being. It's like, you know what? I'm going to see him like that. And it's holographic. The whole is contained in every aspect of itself. When you can create that intent for someone else, that he experiences himself as successful, that is already living in you. You are conditioning the field.
What I love about that, Dianne, is just the way I understand it is we're always standing in a place of empowerment then, because we have at any moment in time the power to create change for ourselves through this new way of thinking and how we want to experience our lives.
Well, and let me just jump in and
So
just kind of
beautifully said.
Finished out with an actual section of Dianne's book, Quantum Think, New Thinking That Will Rock Your World, as we come to the end of the show here. Not tomorrow, not next year, not when you get everything worked out in the world because of where you're at, not of where you sit on a mountaintop for 20 years contemplating right living, but now. And in the book, I think the biggest thing that jumped out for me, Dianne, was the awakening of consciousness is the most important thing that we can do on this planet.
Amen.
So real quick, as we start to close the show here, how can folks find you?
The best way is to go to my website, which is DianneCollins.com. Dianne with 2 N's, very important, DianneCollins. Everything is there, all the social media connections, my blog on the Huffington Post, lots of free audio and video, and access to my book.
Perfect. Well, we'll also post that on the Inspired Living Facebook and Twitter pages. Thanks so much, Dianne, for being our special guest.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you both for everything.
Next week's special guest, if you're a Pink Floyd fan, you're going to want to tune in. We have Ginger Gilmore, ex-wife of David Gilmour, talking about memoirs on the bright side of the moon. So until next Wednesday, be kind, be caring, be compassionate. Namaste.